About the point of the investigation, now Mr. Durst is in custody. And now detectives are free to go out and to interview people that they could not risk before. Detective Shamlin is going to tell you that Nick Chavin was somebody that he wanted to talk to, but Nick Chavin was very close to Bob Durst. Detective Shamlin is going to tell you that if you contact somebody who's very close to your suspect, and your suspect is not in custody, and that person talks to your suspect might be gone. So Detective Shamlin is going to tell you that now that Bob Durst was in custody, this is the guy at the top of the list that he wanted to speak to. So on April 6, 2015, so this is about 3 weeks after Mr. Durst has been arrested, the evidence will show that multiple attempts were made after Mr. Durst's arrest to contact Nick Chavin, and then Nick Chavin did not want to talk. And you're going to hear from Nick Chavin. He's going to tell you that, you know what, he was avoiding having contact because Bob Durst was his good friend. So he finally returns investigators and prosecutors' calls. And from the start of the conversation, the evidence is going to show that Nick Chavin was reluctant to provide any damaging information against his close friend.
Okay, so tell me, so what is your memory about what Susan said about Bob having killed Kathie?
It's hard for me to say. Can I think about it if I want to talk about that?
So Mr. Chavin made clear that this is something that he wanted to think about. He also made clear during that call, and this is again on April 6, 2015, that he was very conflicted with respect to his loyalties.
Hey, Nick, can you tell me, is it because of your loyalty to Bob?
I mean, it's understandable. You need to be honest about it. We're just trying to figure out what...
I mean,
is it because you guys are still friends, or... I love Susan. She's a very dear friend. And same with Bob, so this thing with your best friend killing your other best friend.
Now, Chavin was specifically asked about Susan's comments about having provided Bob Durst with an alibi for Kathie.
Nick, you also mentioned that Susan said to you that Bob had confided in her to more easily set up an alibi. Do you remember telling the police that?
No.
Do you...
Yes. No, we're not saying whether this is necessarily true or not. We're trying to figure out what Susan told you, that somehow she helped Bob with an alibi and What did you say about that?
Tell us what you meant by that.
And again, it's not that you're saying you believe this to be true. Just what did Susan tell you about it? It's hard to remember. I tell you, it's in my mind, if I sit down and think about it, I can put myself back there and remember it. I don't know if I do it. There was something that she said like that. What did they say after?
Now, the evidence is going to show that it's not that Nick Chavin didn't remember during that conversation exactly what he knew. He just wasn't ready to say it yet. Now, Chavin was asked during that conversation if Durst had ever confessed to him that he had killed Susan. Would he tell us? So if Bob Durst had told you, I killed Susan, would you tell us? This is what he said.
So when I asked you, hey, listen, has Bob ever admitted that he killed Kathie, you had a long pause, and then you said, that's something I don't want to answer. I know you said you didn't want to answer it, but you agree you didn't say no, correct?
I agree to that.
You know what? We lost a slide. Let me see. Go back. Yeah. So you did not lose this. What's that? You did not lose this.
So when I asked you, hey, listen, has Bob ever admitted that he killed Kathie? You had a long pause. If I were to say to you, hey, did Bob ever admit to you that he killed Susan? And your answer is, I don't want to answer that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Looks like operator error on my part. Chabon was then asked some, we'll see what this is going to be because I'm not sure. I think I have my slides mixed up, so I'm going to just play it and we'll see what we got.
Have you ever asked Bob, hey Bob, did you kill Kathie? Or is that another one of those ones you don't want to answer?
That's one of those other one I have.
I know this is tough, but I want you to think about this for a second. Forgetting about Bob for a second, Susan was your close friend, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Forgetting about Bob for a minute, do you want the person who's responsible for her death, do you want that person held accountable? Forgetting about Bob for a second, just whoever that person is, do you want that person held accountable?
Well, you remember what Susan told me about Bob, which was, there's nothing we can do for her now, she's gone, but he's not.
And so is what the way I'm taking that, Nick, is you're kind of the same thing that Susan said about Kathie, you're now kind of saying to yourself about Susan, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's alive. He's not.
So it's a little bit hard to hear. What the evidence is going to show, Nick Chabon said is that, in essence, he didn't want to say, and he cited back to what Susan had told him about Kathie, which is, Kathie's gone, Bob's still here, we need to protect Bob. Nick Chabon's now saying, Susan's gone, Bob's still here, we need to protect Bob. During the call, despite repeated pleadings to please say what you know, Nick Chabon made clear that he just wasn't ready to say what he knew yet.
That's part of the change that's happened with me. I do want the person accountable, and that's what's happened that's changed. You can do that by just telling us the truth. I know. I intended to probably not in this phone.
Now, near the end of the call, the following exchange occurred.
I know when you get off this call, you're going to probably say to yourself, what have I done?
That's exactly
what have I said? And I can tell you that you've said a lot.
So my intention is to duck you as long as I possibly could. But I was so far under the radar it wouldn't happen.
So what Nick Chabon was saying is that he acknowledged that he understood that he had said a whole lot, and he said that he had ducked us as long as he could, and that he thought he was so under the radar that he wouldn't end up having to talk to us. Now, the evidence is going to show that although Chabon would not reveal the extent of what he knew, he did not deny that he had important information that he just wasn't ready to share yet.
Now, if you choose to talk to us, then we can come out there and we can sit down and talk to you, but just tell us this, without going into all the details. I mean, we pretty much know it. You pretty much said it. You just have skirted around it. Bob pretty much told you recently after he was arrested that he killed Susan, right?
I'm not saying anything. I think you know the answer to that.
And his response is he's not going to be able to answer it, but he did not deny it. He was again asked, and he refused to say that if Bob had confessed to killing Susan to him, that he would tell us.
If Bob had confessed to you, if Bob had said, listen, I killed Susan, would you tell us right now?
Oh, I didn't want to right now.
Yeah.
So, wait. So the answer for right now, at least during this phone call, is no, you would not tell us. Is that correct?
Well, I think he's telling us he has told us, and we know the answer. He just doesn't want to use the words. Is that right?
Both of you guys are kind of right. I just want a little more time to think about it.
Can I just ask you this? Even though...
It's already out of the bag.
So Nick Chavin made clear when Mr. Balian said on the phone call, well, he has told us. Nick Chavin said, you know, both of you were right, that he didn't want to tell us, but that he actually already had. Now, Nick Chavin was very clear in this call that he was having a lot of problem and a lot of difficulty trying to balance his loyalties to his two best friends.
It's very clear with what you're saying. It's very clear that you're carrying a big weight right now, and you're trying to figure out what's the right thing to do. Am I being a disloyal friend?
That's exactly right. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, am I being a disloyal friend? You know, I can't bring Kathie back. I can't bring Susan back. But I will tell you that what's right is right. And I think you know, I don't have to tell you what's right and what's wrong. Bob has said things to you, and I think you know what the right thing to do is right now. And if you can just get yourself over the hurdle, you know, it's almost like ripping a Band-Aid off, Nick. Just...
Let me tell you, you'll say everything you're saying is just reaches right into the end street. That's exactly what I feel.
So he responded to the comment about how hard it was and that it was like ripping a Band-Aid off by saying that's exactly how he feels. Evidence is going to show that during this conversation he would not say what he knew, but he did say that he would do so on another day.
I mean, Nick, in the end, we are all responsible in life for the choices that we make. You can't be responsible for what Bob has done, but you can be responsible for covering up for him. And, you know, it's time.
I haven't had to do it.
No, you haven't, because no one has. So I can tell, Nick, it's very funny. You've been kind of waiting for this call from us and trying to figure out what you were going to say and how you're going to handle it. Am I right?
You're right, 100%.
Okay, well, sorry. So listen, so here you are. This is kind of the moment of truth. Just let it out, Nick. Tell us what Bob said. Just get it out.
I'm gonna still ripping off the Band-Aid for another day or so. I promise you I'll talk to you.
Okay, hey, listen, are you giving me...
Give my word.
The last thing I'm going to...
So he said in the end, you know what, I'm not ready to rip the Band-Aid off yet, but I'll talk to you on another day. So the evidence is going to show that Nick Chavin was called the next day, April 7th, 2015. And this is how this conversation started.
If we call you tomorrow, you'll tell us the whole thing?
No, I'll talk to you and tell you what I've decided I can say.
Okay. All right. Hey, listen.
But I'm going to be saying that, I mean, you know, I just want to think some more.
Got one slide ahead. So that was the last thing. So it ended with, you know, we'll call you tomorrow. And he'll tell us what he's going to tell us. And this is what happened.
Yeah, when you get off the phone, the first thing you'll be saying to yourself is, oh my God, what did I say?
What did I do?
Why did I tell him that? And have I told him too much, etc.? You've already told us 90% of it. So the Band-Aid's almost all off. So we'll call...
Why I told you I knew that if I told you this much, that I couldn't back away.
Hey, Nick, it is very clear to me there are certain people that don't want to give you information. There are other people that you just have to figure out a way to let them give you the information they want to give you. You want to tell us this, it's clear.
Right.
So,
your message was just call me the message that I don't want to talk to you if I didn't want to.
Yeah, so you could have done that.
I didn't do that.
No, you didn't.
So this was the end of that call, and Nick Chavin related that he had been left a message saying, listen, if you don't want to talk to us, just return the call. Because the evidence is going to show he had not returned any calls. Detectives, investigators, prosecutors trying to get a hold of him, and he won't return a call. So he confirmed, as you just heard, that he was told, hey, if you don't want to talk, call us and let us know you don't want to talk. But as he said, he didn't do that. He called and he talked. Following day, April 7th, he was called again.
When we talked yesterday, you said that you and Bob had conversations, And when I asked you, did Bob tell you that he killed Susan and then he killed Kathie, you said that that was a question you didn't want to answer.
Right. Well, it was the subject was only Susan, not Kathie.
And this is when Nick Chavin began to mention a dinner that he and Bob had had in Harlem.
It's open to interpretation, okay? We had dinner in Harlem, and during the dinner, he mentioned that one of the things he wanted to do is he wanted to tell me, he said, I wanted to talk to you about Kathie and Susan. He said both names in, but then we had dinner, we had a few drinks, and all of a sudden it was time to leave, and we left, we walked outside, and I looked, he was going to go one way, I was going to go the other, and I looked at him, I said, Bob, you were going to tell me about Susan. And he turned me, he just sort of shrugged, and looked real, he looked upset, and he just shrugged, and kind of mumbled something. I've been trying to put together what it was, and I can't really put together what it was, but he just had a resigned look on his face. Then he walked away, and I said, Bob, and he didn't turn back around. He just sort of walked, he looks like a very old man now, anyway. He walked off, and that was that. I just took him not denying it as meaning something. And then the subject of Kathie didn't come up, it was just Susan. The irony is we were supposed to have dinner again, but then all this stuff happened and going to New Orleans.
Now the evidence is going to show that when Nick Chavin eventually says what happened, it's everything he just said, except for on April 7th, he wasn't ready to say what Bob had told him. You're going to hear from him. He's going to testify, and he's going to tell you that he knew from the very first call. He knew on April 6th what Bob Durst told him, but that it was just so hard. That was his close friend, and that Nick Chavin's going to tell you that a part of it was that he himself did not want to believe and did not want to accept that his best friend could have murdered their other best friend. He was in denial, he's going to tell you. And he wasn't ready to kind of face the facts. And the evidence is going to show that over the next several months, prosecutors and investigators contacted Chavin numerous times. And that those calls, Nick Chavin continued to resist, fully explaining what he knew. He remained resistant. By July 23rd, Chavin was actually attempting, you'll hear, to take back some of the information he had provided.
You also had told us during the first conversation, you had dinner with Bob, and the words that you had used was, you had said that when I asked if Bob confessed, you said he didn't have to. Do you remember telling us that?
No. What?
Okay, so...
I don't even know what it means.
So...
I don't even know what she's told you that I said to her.
So that was Nick Chavin on July 23rd. After a series of additional phone calls, on October 15, 2015, there was another call during which the following exchanges occurred.
Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Start with us. Go ahead. Tell us what happened.
Well, I don't want to do that in this conversation. I got people sitting outside my office now. This is not good. I need to...
Well, okay, so when can we have this conversation?
I'll call you just like I did now. I mean, I've given this a lot of thought, and it's weird. The other thing that's weird to me is how you seem to know what's going on inside my mind. I guess you've done this a lot.
My impression of you is not, your problem isn't you can't remember what Bob told you. Your problem is you're having a hard time forgetting it.
Yeah, pretty good.
Stuart and Emily Altman are two of Bob Durst's oldest and closest friends. Stuart and Durst That is Bob Durst in the middle, that's Stewart to the right, that's Emily to the left. Stewart attended high school with Bob Durst in Scarsdale, New York. They graduated together many years ago. Stewart is also an experienced criminal defense attorney in New York. Emily Altman was called to testify at a conditional examination in this case. There's going to be a stipulation regarding her testimony, so you're not going to see Emily again live, but you're going to hear her conditional examination. Now, Emily reluctantly testified after unsuccessfully challenging her subpoena in both New York and California court. She did not want to testify. Throughout her testimony, Emily was accompanied in this very courtroom by two of her own attorneys. Those attorneys were paid for by Bob Durst. Now, Emily made clear during her testimony that Bob Durst was a close friend. She admitted that he was godfather to her son. During her testimony, Emily repeatedly claimed a lack of memory, which presented with the most simple of questions. And you're going to listen to her testimony. And the evidence is going to show that she's up on the stand trying to protect her friend. Now, on July 26, 2017, during Emily's second day of testimony, the prosecution initiated a line of questioning, inquiring whether Durst had ever told her where he had been at the time of Susan's murder. Now, at this time, July 26, 2017, the evidence is going to show that Bob Durst had always steadfastly denied that he was anywhere near Los Angeles at the time of Susan's murder. He had, at this point in time, steadfastly denied that he had been at Susan's house. He had steadfastly denied that he had written the cadaver note. And all of a sudden, during the second day of testimony, this is what happened. Emily initially answered that Durst had told her he was in California, but she claimed repeatedly not to have any specific information. After much resistance, the following exchange occurred, which revealed shocking information.
Did Bob Durst ever tell you, in the course of your relationship as friends, that he was in Los Angeles at the time of Susan Berman's murder?
I think he said he was in Los Angeles at some time, but I don't remember specifically saying he was there when Susie Berman was murdered.
When you say he said he was in Los Angeles at some time, you don't mean just generally he's visiting Los Angeles. You mean that he told you, your understanding was that he was in Los Angeles at the time that Susan Berman was murdered. Isn't that correct?
He said he was in Los Angeles.
At the time Susan Berman was murdered, correct?
He didn't say that, no.
What
he said he was in Los Angeles.
And in Los Angeles, in terms of what conversation? Strike that. When he's saying he's in Los Angeles, you're talking about at the time Susan Berman was murdered, correct?
In December.
So he said he was in Los Angeles in December of 2000, correct?
Yeah.
Did you ask him specifically what dates in December of 2000 he was in Los Angeles? Ma'am, are you aware, as you sit here today, that Mr. Durst has never admitted to investigators or to the media that he was in Los Angeles in December of 2000? Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not.
Did he mention a hotel or what he was doing here?
I think he mentioned Beverly Hills. I know this was.
So he told you that he was staying at the Beverly Hilton in Los Angeles at the time Susan Berman was murdered. Is that correct?
Yes.
Ma'am, at that time, did you think that was important information that the police might need to know?
No.
At any point in time, in the last 17 years almost, has it ever occurred to you that, you know what, that might be important information that the authorities should know about? Now, isn't it true that you chose your friendship with that man? You chose your friendship over justice for Susan Berman?
No.
Now, multiple subsequent questions were premised, and you're going to hear all this, on the fact that Durst had told Emily that he was at the Beverly Hilton around the time of Susan's murder. So the evidence is going to show that she was repeatedly asked when he told you he was at the Beverly Hilton in December of 2000, and then the question. And for the duration of her testimony that day, she never denied nor expressed any doubt that it was Durst himself who had told her that information. The next day, July 27, Emily returned to court for more testimony. During her cross-examination by Mr. DeGuerin, and for the first time, Emily suddenly provided an alternative explanation for Durst's admission. In response to a leading question, Emily stated that the source of her statement that Durst was in Los Angeles at the Beverly Hilton might not have been Robert Durst. So she got up there and said, you know what, maybe I didn't hear it from Bob. Instead, Emily now said the information might have been provided to her by her husband. Now, approximately 1 month later, again after multiple efforts to avoid testifying himself, Stuart Altman finally took the witness stand. During his testimony, Stuart, who is a licensed attorney, conceded that he had talked to his wife about her testimony while she was still on the witness stand. This conversation, he testified, and you'll hear, took place after her testimony on July 26th and before her testimony the next day, the point when her version of who she heard the information from suddenly changed. Now, Stuart testified that he told Emily, a witness, who he knew was still testifying under oath, that she had been wrong in her testimony. Stuart added that during his conversation with Emily, in the middle of that testimony, that she was concerned that her testimony about Durst being in Beverly Hills at the time Susan was murdered was going to be damaging to the case. So Stuart Altman is up there and he's testifying that my wife knew that what she had said was damaging, that it was going to hurt Bob Durst, and I told her, you're wrong. Now, Stuart testified that contrary to Emily's testimony on July 27, 2017, he made clear that he never told her that Durst had ever told him that he was in Beverly Hills at the time of Susan's murder. So the evidence is going to demonstrate that Emily's testimony, where she had said the day before, well, maybe I heard it from my husband, Stuart, is going to be impeached by her own husband. The evidence is going to show that Emily did not hear that statement from Stuart. She heard it as she originally testified out of Bob Durst's mouth. Now, back on June 12, 2015, Stuart had talked to Durst while Durst was in custody in a Louisiana jail. So remember, this is about 3 months after his arrest. And this is a conversation that Stuart and Bob are having. Now, the subject of the conversation was, where was Durst at the time of Susan's murder?
Yeah, I saw it yesterday, and we went over a whole bunch of stuff. And they wanted to talk about where I was, when and how, and everything in Los Angeles. And I've been putting it off and putting it off. Just because I'm uncertain and uncomfortable trying to take a position, since I keep remembering things differently, sort of. So I've never spoken to him at all about where I was, etc., in Los Angeles.
Right. I know. What? It's like 14 years ago, for God's sake.
So the evidence is going to show that Bob Durst, back in June of 2015, was still deciding where he was going to say he was. Not that he didn't know where he was, but he hadn't taken a position yet. Now, what has Bob Durst's position been over the years on whether he wrote the cadaver note? What has his position been? 2010, talking to Jarecki and Smerling.
Well, to begin with, you didn't write the cadaver note, is that what you're
I
saying?
didn't write the cadaver note.
Can you think of a reason why somebody might write a note like that?
I can't imagine. Can't imagine.
2012 with Jarecki.
So, I guess the question is, did you write the cadaver note?
No, I didn't write the cadaver note.
2015, when he was interviewed in the New Orleans jail.
The issue is going to be, there's kind of two choices that you have, two ways you could go. You could say, listen, I went down there, and you would have to explain why you went down there.
Yeah. I mean, I saw that and the people's comments and the stuff like that. Somebody could have gone into the house and saw that Susan was lying there.
Right. And you agree that that did not happen. You did not drive down there and find Susan's body, even though you were not the killer.
I don't agree to anything like that. I mean, that's evidentiary.
Okay, so you don't want to answer that. No. What I'm telling you is, I'm just saying, that did not happen. You agree, you did not just find Susan's body and somebody else killed her.
I did not find Susan's body.
Durst has also made clear, absolutely, and without reservation, that whoever wrote the cadaver note is in fact the person who murdered Susan Berman.
You're writing a note to the police that only the killer could have written.
First of all, you agree, as you sit here today, you agree that whoever wrote that letter, they killed Susan. Agreed?
You see, I don't know that. I mean, maybe there were two people who killed Susan. It doesn't have to be one person. There could be two people. One person could go into the house to shoot Susan, and the other person could be the driver.
Okay, no, let me, this is what I mean. Whether the person was the shooter or the driver, whoever wrote the note was a part of killing her.
Yes.
You agree, right?
Yes.
No question, right?
Whoever wrote that note had to be involved in Susan's death.
After many years of adamantly and repeatedly denying that he wrote the cadaver note, saying that only the killer could have written it, on December 24th, 2019, 3 months ago, Durst stipulated that he wrote the cadaver note. Now, Nick Chavin would ultimately recount in court the rest of that conversation from that dinner in Harlem in December of 2014. And this is what he said, under oath, while on the witness stand.
The dinner concluded, and it was then that as we got up to leave, I realized that we hadn't discussed the two things that he had mentioned, Kathie and Susan. I felt kind of weird that I didn't bring it up. We walked out the door. This is hard. We walked out the door, and on the sidewalk, I said, "You wanted to talk about Susan?" And Bob said, "I had to. It was her or me. I had no choice." And then he turned to walk away, and I said, "You wanted to talk about Kathie?" And he just kept walking away. Nothing more was said.
Nick Chavin said at that dinner, Bob Durst said to him, "It was her or me." I had no choice. The evidence is going to show that Mr. Durst, as he volunteered in the interview in New Orleans, that when pushed into the corner, he quoted Detective Cazalis. Mr. Durst brought it up, saying, when pushed into a corner, Bob Durst will kill. And the evidence will show that Bob Durst found himself pushed into a corner with his best friend, who was going to talk to investigators, a person that he knew had a penchant for talking, someone he knew who Susan's friends, including Steven Silverman, again, something Bob Durst quoted, she's the last person you want to tell a secret to. Well, the evidence is going to show that when Bob Durst killed Kathie Durst, he didn't have a whole lot of choices as to who he was going to call to help him. And he called Susan Berman. It's a choice that would ultimately cost Susan her life. And it's a choice that many years later would ultimately lead to Mr. Durst's downfall. Now, the evidence at trial, we're going to show that Robert Durst is responsible, that he killed Kathie Durst, that he killed her, and then he got rid of her body. That's what we will prove. We will prove that he deliberately lied to investigators so that he could avoid responsibility for his conduct. We will show that when the reinvestigation happened, and when Susan Berman told him that, you know what, I'm going to talk to investigators, that she sealed her fate, that he drove down to Los Angeles in that Ford Explorer, that he was let into the house, that he waited for Susan to turn her back on her best friend, someone she loved and trusted, and he executed her at point-blank range. The evidence is going to show that he murdered his friend Morris Black, dismembered his corpse, dumped the body parts like they were trash into Galveston Bay. And then he did that because, again, Morris Black was a connection to Kathie. When Bob Durst, the evidence will show, when Bob Durst killed Kathie, he killed Susan and Morris as well. Because once that happened, once he did that, there was no turning back. And Bob Durst, as the evidence will show, is a person who's going to protect and take care of Bob Durst. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what the evidence is going to show in this case. It's been long and it's complicated because Mr. Durst has committed a lot of crimes. I will have the opportunity, we'll present our case, and we'll have the opportunity to get up here in closing and to argue what the evidence is going to show. But as we sit here right now and as you listen to the evidence, please understand and please evaluate it carefully. And again, please also, as you're listening, remember that many of the most damaging aspects of this case are going to come directly from him. A few months from now, I'll get up here and I'll ask you to finally hold him accountable for what he has done. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Lewin. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll let this thing start fresh tomorrow morning and let you go home early today. So, of course, be mindful of our admonition. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. We'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m.